Are you ready to wake up? You're now entering Dreamland. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Now Entering Dreamland, a podcast about dreams, sleep, and everything in between. Welcome back to those of you who have been to Dreamland before. We're happy to have you back. And welcome to those of you joining us in Dreamland for the first time. It's a Sunday, and that means I'm releasing a new episode of this podcast. And I'm excited because this is going to be an interview style episode, which are my favorite types of episodes to publish for this podcast. This week features an interview with one of my dear friends, John Charles. John is someone who I have known for a few years now. We both perform comedy in Washington, D.C. We were on a team together for many years called Billy Kowalski's Brother, and John currently performs with the team Moonraker, a dojo comedy house team, dojo comedy being a comedy theater located in Washington, D.C. For this episode, John and I talk about dreams, how to remember your dreams, dream recall. John keeps a dream diary, which he does in an attempt to try to better remember his dreams. So we talk about that. And then, of course, because it's me, I kind of veer off the topic of dreams a little bit and talk about movies and films and art because those are also things I really care about. I really enjoyed my conversation with John, and I think you will too. So without further ado, a conversation about dreams and sleep with John Charles.
So I remember some of my dreams, but through my life, I have not done a good job being able to recall dreams, and it's been frustrating for me. So what often happens is I'll remember it just as I'm waking, but then maybe as I finally get myself up, that's when I forget my dreams
Mm-hmm.
historically. So recently, I'd say in the last few months, I have gotten better at remembering dreams and capturing them.
Right.
Possibly, it's probably because I've been writing things down more. So yeah,
Interesting. What has Are you just writing down your dreams or are you writing down kind of everything more?
I'm writing everything more,
Interesting.
but I did make a particular focus on dreams in the last. Well, I'm looking at one of my notebooks here. Yeah, it's been several months now. Maybe, I don't know, half a year at least. At least.
What prompted that? What prompted that change of starting to write things down?
Well, I'd been reading about how I guess there's a lot of research that says that when you write things down physically using pen and paper, the well, a couple things happen. The ideas come out and you remember them more. They make more of a, I guess, a neural trace in your brain. And also, I think it's a good way of letting go of things. So, and maybe that's more just from my own experience and observation. When I write things down, then they don't keep sticking in my mind. And I think that's a good thing, just to get rid of thoughts sometimes and let them loose.
I totally agree with that for me at least from a stand-up perspective. Like sometimes towards the end of the day, I feel so bogged down by all the different stand-up ideas I have. It feels so like a weight has been lifted off almost when I write the ideas down. I know they've been captured on my notebook, so I can just let it go, let it go from my mind.
Right. Yeah.
So for your dreams, what are you remembering most? Do you have good dreams or do you technically have nightmares or where do you fall on that?
It's funny. Most of my dreams are pretty mundane. So
Hmm.
nothing really great happens, nothing bad happens. A lot of it is like it's really also I still have trouble with detail. So sometimes there's only one wisp of like who's there, what's happening. I read somewhere that it's good to get um, to remember your emotion, like how did it make you feel? because somehow that's important apparently for being able to interpret dreams. So if I can, I try to remember how I felt in the dream. So as much as I can, I try to write these things down.
Wow. Can you give an example of a dream you've had recently?
Well, let's see. I've got my
Oh,
like,
yes, you have your notebook right here. I love it.
okay. Sometimes I have trouble reading my own writing. Okay.
Same.
Um, all right. Okay. Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. I can't read that one. Okay. Okay, let me keep trying.
Okay.
Okay, here's one. It's very simple. My neighbors across the street recently had their 20th wedding anniversary, I think it was.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
And so in the dream, they were smiling at me and they were just like across the street. But what was weird is they were like young, like when they had just got married. They were that age. So I just remember feeling like, oh, that's interesting. What's that about? So that was a very brief little dream, but that's what I remembered um, from it. And let's see. Okay, so a lot of my dreams have to do with college things because I'm very involved with
Mhm.
my alumni association, and I have
Right.
I got all these meetings and board meetings, things like that. And so I was at another local alum in Arlington. We were working on some project, and it might have been delivering something. And I was trying to leave, but it was taking a while. And then at the end, we were talking about a graduate program in ice cream production. And then what else? Yeah, that was so weird. So I don't know how I felt. I like ice cream, but um, oh my gosh, yeah. It's like all these very little pieces, but I do notice as I look back, I've done a pretty good job of writing something down for most days, most of my in the morning.
That's great. And that's something that since I've started this podcast, I've been trying to do more of
Hmm.
just because I wasn't in the process of writing down all my dreams. I sometimes would, I sometimes wouldn't. My therapist really wants me to write them down. I'm finally doing it, not because she wants me to, because of the podcast. So I'm sorry, Dr. Nesbitt, if you're listening to this, but I'm finally doing what you've asked me to do. But I do think it helps so much to remember dreams when you do write them down.
Yes. Yes. Even if, let's say, like let's say you remember, sometimes you remember little bits of the dream the longer away ago it was, but if you don't write them down, you always, there's that detail that I would not remember, really even silly little things.
Definitely.
um, I was looking at another one where I was in Japan. So I used to live in Japan for 2.5
Right.
years, quite a while ago, and I was in a hotel. And so so both my parents have passed away, but sometimes they've been coming back in my dreams, here and there. And
John.
yeah, it's kind of interesting that in this one, so I guess my dad was calling room service, and then he realized that he could get so much more if he used, oh my gosh. It's so embarrassing. So so something happened in this, getting room service, but because I can't read my own writing, um, you know, what I do notice also is my best recall, my most like the most detail comes when I do have to wake up in the middle of the night. Luckily, it hasn't been happening too much recently. I think it happened more in the
Mm.
summertime, maybe in the summer because sometimes I probably have slightly harder time sleeping or in the summer
When it
for,
gets really hot, I think it's
yeah,
harder to sleep.
definitely. So those are the times when if I wake up at the right time, I do have another notebook by my bed that I can write, you know, all the detail, and that tends to be the best recall. If I wait until, or if I sleep through the night and I wake up, most of the time what I can recall is somewhat limited, like you've as
Yes.
you have seen me recount to you here, just little snippets. So It's still kind of disappointing though. I wish that I was like one of those people who, could remember like the images and the, all the colors and sights and sounds, but that tends not to happen for me.
You know what I've learned recently that I think is very interesting, and it wasn't when I was doing research for this podcast, but it fits so well into what I was doing. Have you on Netflix, are you a Netflix fan by chance?
I am, although I never find enough time to watch it.
Well, if you find time, I'm watching a show now that's called Evil. It literally is called Evil, and it's a series.
Uh-huh.
And basically, it's about this woman who's a forensic scientist, a forensic examiner,
Yeah.
and she's hired by this priest to help determine if the cases that he investigates are actual demonic possessions or are something else, like some type of psychopathy or,
Mhm.
some other ailment,
Yeah.
mental, physical, or otherwise. And one thing that she deals with is, since she takes this job, and really she only takes it because she needs the money, but she takes this job and she begins to have these night terrors, which I used to have,
Mm.
where she begins to see this figure, this demon figure, visit her at night. And her therapist suggests to her that she writes on a piece of paper like a line of text,
Mm.
because apparently in your dream you cannot read text, you cannot read. So the therapist kind of presents that to her in a sense of, you won't be able to read this if you're sleeping, and that's how you know you're sleeping.
Oh,
And I've never realized that, but then when I watched that episode and I saw that, I said to myself, you know what, that is making a lot of sense,
yeah.
because I don't ever remember reading things in my dream. I don't remember a text at all. And I actually don't really remember people's faces now that I think about it.
I see. Now, do you ever know, I guess like in a lucid dream, do you know you are in a dream and can you control the actions and activities?
I've lucid dreamed several times in my life, and I need to get better at doing it because sometimes I feel almost trapped in my nightmares, and I would love to be able to have more control in it.
Mhm.
But I do lucid dream sometimes, and I do remember those very well, very vividly.
Okay.
Um, but it doesn't happen all the time. I feel like I usually do remember my dreams. One of your dreams reminded me of, have I ever told you about my Ulysses S. Grant thing?
You might have, but I don't remember. Please.
So, Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president of the United States, I don't know why, but I am so afraid of him
Uh-oh.
subconsciously, because just as I'm speaking to you about him, I have no ill will. I can't speak. I'm going to edit this out because I sound silly, but ill will towards
Yeah.
this man. I don't know him. He fought against the Confederacy, so he's on the right side of history, I suppose. I don't know too much about his other policies, so maybe I don't even want to say that, but that's Ulysses S. Grant. And since I was a teenager, I've had recurring dreams that he has been haunting me. And
Wow.
I don't know, the only thing I can think of as to why, and this is a stretch, but I visited Grant's tomb on a school field trip when I was in fourth grade. But the reason that doesn't make sense to me is because I started having these dreams when I was 16 or 17. So about 7 years had passed since I had originally visited Grant's tomb. So I don't know why suddenly I started having these dreams. But basically, in these dreams, I'm in a field. I'll always be in the same field.
Uh-huh.
And it's not nighttime, but it's dusk. So it's almost nighttime. It's dark, but it's not pitch black night. And Grant's ghost will just be floating around. And in my mind, and no one's speaking, no one speaks in this dream, but in my mind, I just know that if Grant's ghost will find me, that's bad. I don't want that to happen. So
Yeah.
I'm hiding from it, and then I wake up whenever I wake up, and there's never been any type of conclusion to this dream. I've just been really afraid that Grant is gonna
Oh.
find me. And I just don't know why I'm so afraid of him.
We now, so as I understand it, didn't he have a lot of Maryland connection at different points, Grant?
Yes, he did. He did, and I don't know why. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not just that you visited in fourth grade, but maybe there's some other overlap. And then this gets into, of course, with dreams, it gets into other things such as, ghosts and spirits, and do you believe in those things? And, is it possible to communicate with people who are not here physically? And that's another view, I guess, of dreams.
Do you believe that, John?
So I believe in a lot of stuff that, well, here's the thing.
Tell me.
I'm open to what I don't understand. So in other words, maybe I don't have any proof or any, physical evidence that something exists. But if I don't know for sure that it doesn't exist, I'm not going to close the door to the possibility that there are powers or beings that are there somewhere, um, in our sleep, that come out during our sleep. Or I guess some people say that when you sleep, um, you discontinue your own limiting beliefs. So maybe there's something about just
Mm.
being open and being receptive. I don't know. It's quite interesting, though.
I agree with that. What are something, I mean, if you don't mind that I ask these questions, do you
Mhm.
believe in ghosts?
So now I don't know if the word ghost is what I believe in. Do I believe that people have a spirit that's separate from their own physical entities? And yeah, I guess I believe in souls, and in that we all have souls that are, um, what's the word, eternal, and that would separate at death. So yeah, I guess I do. I guess I would say I believe in those.
I believe in ghosts, and I think in a way, in the sense of maybe an old-fashioned view, like a floating,
Mhm.
see-through ghost type of figure. Because when I went to college, I went to this very small college called Hood College,
Mhm.
and there were some haunted buildings in and around campus. And Frederick, Maryland, where Hood College is itself, has a lot of haunted buildings in it. And that city, and also all of Maryland, was very, I mean, Maryland was such a hotbed of the Civil War because it
That's
was so
right.
close to DC, and
Yeah.
but it's also, more closer to the South than I think us Marylanders sometimes would want it to be.
Right.
Um, but I, there were so many buildings in Frederick that were just known to be haunted buildings. But on my campus, in particularly, there was a building that we used as the music hall that the college didn't always own. And through various points in
Hmm.
history, it was a barn, it was a tavern, it housed the college faculty, and then it was a mansion, and then it went through many iterations. And basically what we came to find out is that years prior to the college, back in the mid 1800s, it was, and it's very eerie because I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes when you look at old timey photographs, especially old timey photographs of areas, I find it very unsettling, especially when
Mhm.
I look at photos from the 1850s of maybe a neighborhood in DC, because it shows the neighborhood being constructed, and it's, in my mind, it's very jarring because you're saying, oh
Mm.
my gosh, like I've walked down this sidewalk,
Right.
and look, it's not, the sidewalk's not even here, it's just grass. And
Right.
it just seems like very still to me, almost.
Right.
But there are all these pictures from my college's archives of the land around this mansion. And literally, the college was built up around this mansion because the mansion was owned separately for so many years. And then the college kind of started constructing itself to the left side of the mansion and then eventually bought the mansion. But what ended up happening, there was this family that lived in the mansion, and for the details are dubious, but at some point in the mid 1800s, every single member of the family of people who lived in that mansion were all killed in it.
Oh.
So there's a lot of speculation as to what happened, who killed who, how did this all happen. I mean, it's literally like something out of a Stephen King novel, is what I'm going to say. And so when I was in college, I was really active in our student newspaper. And we decided that one night we were going to stay overnight in this building, which was normally, besides for daytime functions and for classes, I mean, it really was the music building, and we had our plays and musicals in this building. You know, we didn't do much with it. And we tried to stay overnight. We went in there around 9 p.m. I made it until around 2 a.m. And then I was freaked out, but I was honestly very tired. And our college was very small, so it was very feasible for me to just walk right from that building back to my dorm. And I just went to sleep in my bed as per normal night. But we did have 3 or 4 of our newspaper staff actually stay until about 5 a.m. So maybe not the whole night, but almost the entire night. And, you know, unfortunately, we didn't see anything. We did use a Ouija board at one time. Have you ever used a Ouija board?
Yeah, but I think the older kids were moving it around when I was doing it, so I don't know.
How old were you when you were using it?
Probably like 6.
Oh, John. I to this day, I don't know if someone on my newspaper staff was moving it, or if, I don't know, it definitely, the planchette, I think is the technical term for that thing. It moved. I don't know if someone was moving it or what was happening, but the weirdest thing about it was that it was moving for a while and then it just stopped moving. So that was strange. But besides for that, we didn't see anything. But I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think sometimes buildings have a feeling about them.
Oh, yeah.
And this building always had a feeling. And I personally was in this building a lot because I was always involved in our musicals. So we were always in that building. And I distinctly remember there was this one time when I had to go back down to our green room to get dressed because I was in my costume for the musical we were doing. And, you know, it was a full costume and I had to go back down. And I distinctly remember I originally had intended to just change my clothes in the green room, as we all did, but I was so just unsettled by being in there. It was so, like, almost oppressively scary that I just grabbed my clothes and I said to myself, I'll just change in my dorm and then bring the costume back the next day, because I did not want to be there alone. I just felt I felt so terrible. And I haven't felt like that about building another building until I went to Salem, Massachusetts 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh. And we know what happened in Salem, Massachusetts, don't we?
Nothing good.
So, you know, it's interesting, Stacy, you were talking about the Civil War, and the moment you said that, my mind went to when I was a child. My family visited Gettysburg. And I will never forget the feeling, speaking of feelings, we watched a film where, you know, they show the fighting. And I just remember there was an overwhelming feeling for me of a little bit of sadness, but kind of just being scared that there were all these dead people, you know, somehow still around. Like I had a feeling like that there were spirits there that, and if I actually, you know, in more recent visits there, you get this feeling like when you talk about going into a building feels a certain way. When I'm on the grounds of Gettysburg National Cemetery, I do feel there is something there. There's a presence that's
Yes.
thick. It's definitely feels unique. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think something I feel like with all people, all human beings is, we have instincts for a reason. We're built with instincts and we're built with them to protect us. And I think so often we're taught to not listen to them, much to my chagrin, because I think I'll admit it openly, I'm a very nervous person.
Mm.
I'm very nervous. I'm always a little bit on high alert. And I think all throughout my life, people have always said, lighten up. What is there to be worried about? But at the same time, when my instincts are flaring a little bit, that is a sign that we have in our bodies to say,
Hmm.
get out of this situation. Like, that's why sometimes I think, I don't like possums, but you never see possums hanging around. Possums know when to go. They'll just go.
Right.
And I totally hear what you're saying about that feeling, that it's a very oppressive feeling. Like sometimes, when you're at a place, you're saying to yourself, it feels like something is looking at me
Mm.
almost. And I think that's a very unsettling feeling, but we know when something is looking at us. It's almost a little bit like,
Mm.
even I love dogs. I don't know how you feel, John, about dogs, but I love them. And sometimes I'll be walking down the street and I'll look across the street and someone is walking a dog and I'll get very interested in it because it's like so cute.
Yeah.
So I'll be looking at it and kind of smiling at it. And granted, I have a mask on, so it can't tell, but the dog will look over at me because
Yes.
even the dog knows I'm aggressively making eyes at it. So I think that's the thing that really unsettles me, is the fact that sometimes it just feels like a place is looking at you.
Right. And maybe that's like there's some kind of energy that in that case that you're sending to the dog. Now we might say that dogs and other animals are more sensitive to that kind of signal, I suppose, than humans are, right? Maybe because
Mhm.
for whatever reason they have that animal instinct. Maybe we've lost that some of our instincts too, as you say, they're in there somewhere, but we've sort of trained ourselves otherwise. Yeah.
Have you visited other haunted places or places that have given you kind of those haunted vibes?
Yes, there was. So one visit to New Orleans, there was one of those nighttime graveyard tours, and I felt it there, definitely. Um,
Ooh, yeah.
Also at Pearl Harbor, the memorial at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Again, there's that feeling that there's some presence there. And again, I don't know, like, is it spirits or what? I don't know what it is, but you feel something. You feel that there is something there, more than just what you see physically. Yeah. How about you? Any other spots?
I So when I went to Salem, that was a big,
Mm,
big trip, I suppose. And Salem just has so much history, especially, it's famous for the Salem witch
yeah.
trials. But I think the most interesting part is the city has a rich history, before and after the witch trials, but it's really infamous because of the witch trials, which as a and I hope it's taught differently now in schools, but I'm 28, almost I'm turning 29 in January, and when I
Mhm.
was, learning about the Salem witch trials, I don't think it was presented to me in a factual way. Whereas I didn't realize until I was an adult visiting Salem, Massachusetts, I didn't realize that I knew that people were accusing people of being witches, and I knew that that typically wasn't true. But what I didn't know until I visited Salem and until I took tours was that pretty much if you were a woman that was single,
Yeah.
or owned land that maybe you bought, or maybe your parents unfortunately passed away and left it to you, and you were just a single
Mhm.
woman owning land, you were really screwed over.
Yeah.
And I don't think they really did a good job at presenting how the whole Salem witch trials really came about, because there are a lot of really corrupt men in the government
Mhm.
there who wanted things to be a certain way. And I think they did a very good way, much like they do in other parts of history, of glossing over
Right.
the important things, which is, they had a status quo, a way of what they wanted to do. And if you were even a little bbit outside of that status
Mhm.
quo, you were automatically painted as some type of witch or devil worshiper, or something was wrong with you.
Right.
And ultimately, there were some buildings in Salem, kind of to the point that I was saying, where I took a haunted tour through Salem, and there were some buildings that we were shown where I felt nothing about it. I honestly, some of them I said, this just looks like a interesting old fashioned building, but I got
Mhm.
no type of feedback from. But there were some buildings where I said, I do not want to be around this building.
Ah.
This feels so intense. There
Mm.
was one day, I was there for about 3 or 4 days, and one day of that trip, I went to this bar that was in this old building, and I knew the building was built around 1750.
Wow.
So it's
Old.
an old building, and it was like a video game bar that they built into it. So it was a fun bar, like good drinks. It was very chill. I love video games. And I said, this is a cool place to just kind of relax, play some games. And then I called an Uber to take me and the person I was traveling with back to the Airbnb. And the Uber driver, who's from that area, when she picked us up, said, do you both know what building you were just in? And then we were like, yeah, it was a bar, and we know that the building's very old. Like, there's a plaque outside the building that says, it's very old. And the Uber driver said, yeah, it is very old, and it was used for hundreds of, like, almost 200 years as a prison.
Whoa.
And we said, no, like, we didn't. But, even with that, didn't feel anything, didn't feel any maliciousness. And I feel like maybe I'm a little, and I don't know if you believe in this, John, but I feel like maybe I'm a little more sensitive to those things. Like, so there are just some days where I'm like, I don't want to go in this building, or this
Yeah.
building's giving me a really bad feeling.
Yeah. 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 I guess I sometimes I don't. I'm trying to think if I feel that strongly about, like, say, buildings, or even maybe it's more vague sometimes, like just doing a certain activity or going a certain direction. Sometimes you feel like you're drawn away from one place to another. And I don't know, that's not necessarily like a reaction to a negative feeling, but it's kind of interesting how that works sometimes, like, why do we have these impulses to go one direction instead of another? I don't know.
No, I totally agree. Are you a Stephen King fan by chance?
So, I don't know that I've seen some Stephen King movies. I don't know that I've ever read a Stephen King novel, which is probably ridiculous, right? Because he's written about 3,000 of them.
Yeah, he really can pump them out, for lack of a better word. But I'm a really big Stephen King fan. I have been since I was about 15.
Wow.
And honestly, that came about because I was really into Stanley Kubrick movies, and then Stanley Kubrick did the film adaptation of The Shining, which
Yes.
it kind of came in tandem. I watched the movie and I said, I need to start reading more Stephen King books. And
Mhm. Mhm.
then I think because so many Stephen King books have been adapted to some type of visual component, whether it's, a movie, or they have the TV show now where they kind of do the whole, like Castle Rock on Hulu, where they do almost a compendium of all Stephen King references located in one place. But there's this in The Shining, which is one of my favorite books and also one of my favorite movies, even though a lot
Yeah.
of people don't like the movie, but that's another story.
That's a
But
scary movie, I gotta say.
it's so scary. It's so scary. There's not in the movie, but in the book, the chef of the hotel, who in the movie is played by Scatman Crothers.
That's right.
But in the book, he doesn't say this in the movie, but in the book, the character of that chef is talking to Danny about his power to kind of see into the future, to really look into the soul of a person, and he calls it The Shining. And he describes it as, whenever he senses there's something off about a situation or a place, he starts smelling oranges. And he's telling Danny about this, and at one point in the book he says, there was one time I booked a flight, and right before I was about to board the plane, I started smelling oranges. So I immediately hopped out of line and I booked for a later flight. And then he asked Danny, he says, do you know what happened to that flight? And Danny says, I don't know. I mean, Danny's a little kid, he doesn't know. And then the chef says nothing happened. So it's one of those things where, and I'm really glad that Stephen King put that in, because I think even they had a magical power, and even then they couldn't predict what was going wrong. They were really just going off a feeling. And I think even then your feeling isn't always right, and it's hard to know how to trust your instincts when all of that is happening.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk about instincts, because there have been times when I've regretted not following an instinct. And I think the lesson I got from it is, why not just follow it in the future? And if it leads to some obvious benefit, great. If not, that's okay too. But there's almost the feeling that, like, I regret more not following it because I knew that I could have followed it. So I'd rather trust my own instinct, because there's got to be a reason I've got this instinct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's something kind of to the point that I was making earlier, where I feel like all of us are really, really taught to not follow our instincts and just kind of like, oh, go out there, it's going to be fine. But no, we're built with this in our bodies to tell us what to do. Would you ever, by chance, go purposely into a reportedly haunted place, John? For example, maybe the Lizzie Borden house.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I remember that rhyme, right?
Lizzie Borden took an axe. Yeah.
That freaked me out, because now I'm having all these memories of all these scary movies, even Poseidon Adventure, which I don't know if that's really considered a scary movie, but for a little kid watching it, and maybe I watched too many things as a little kid that I was too impressionable, that freaked me out. When they were walking and then they found the other people and they said, hey, come with us or whatever, and they didn't, and I was like, whoa, you got to go with them. So anyway, I would get caught up in those kinds of things. So no, I think the answer is probably not. I would avoid any opportunity to really scare myself, because I even now watching movies, sometimes I'll scream out and my boys will say, what's your problem? It's not even a big deal. But I anticipate the scariness very much. So.
I feel like Poseidon Adventure is a scary movie, and I think it's both a very simple concept, but I think it's very effective because it's been remade so many times.
That's
and I
right,
think,
isn't it? Yeah.
Because I remember there's a version of it that came out in the mid 2000s, because I think I was around middle school age when this came out. And I remember going to see it with some friends, and my parents said, well, we saw the original one when it came out, and I think there's been 3 or 4 versions of the Poseidon Adventure, but it is very freaky.
Yeah.
Because I think it really treads the line of, this is arguably something that could very well happen,
right.
Especially when, I don't know if you remember this, but there was that cruise ship that something bad happened to it in Italy or off
Yep.
the coast of Italy.
Yeah.
Not everyone could go into Italy because not everyone had passports. So some of them were just stuck on, I don't know, it was a big mess. And I remember that happening. And it was not exactly like the Poseidon Adventure, but it was almost to that point where something terrible's happening on this cruise ship. But I do think that that's scary. I feel like I am the type of person who I get very, not watching the movie per se, but hearing sometimes about a scary movie or watching a trailer for it, it
Oh, yeah.
will stick with me and it will sometimes infiltrate my dreams a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. So speaking of scary movies, oh my gosh. Okay, I can't remember titles for the life of me. But it's one of the characters. Actually, I saw. So remember the guy who played the TSA agent? He's a comedian, stand-up comedian, who I saw perform in Arlington at the Cinema Draft House. Oh my gosh. Anyway, well, I should just maybe if I describe the movie, but
Yes, describe the movie.
I won't give it away for any of our listeners at home. But basically, it involves a couple, an African.
Get out! Get out!
Yeah. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I can't even. So for the longest time, I didn't see that movie, but I was like, if you've seen the movie, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Don't give it away. Because for me, the biggest thing is not knowing. I don't want to know what happens in a movie. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people don't think about that, and they'll say like, oh, this happened and this happened. It's like, no, especially for a movie like that, of course, right? So anyway, yeah, it's the anticipation, and like many movies of that genre, there's these steps where you think something might happen, and they get you. They get you because you're ready to be gotten. I think in a lot of those movies.
Definitely, I think Get Out is such a well-made horror movie, and I think something that I like about horror movies is that I think a really well-made comedy, mm-hmm. if you just change a few details, could be a really well-made horror movie and vice versa. And I think it's so applicable because Jordan Peele, who created Get Out, he is a comedian. He's a very talented comedian, and he's very, very funny. And he also creates really, really scary movies.
Right.
And the example that I come to a lot is I grew up in an age where I was watching SpongeBob SquarePants, and I remember, SpongeBob is still being made to this day, but I remember being 9 years old, sitting in the living room for the very first ever SpongeBob episode, which makes me feel very old when I talk about it. That was almost 20 years ago. But at the same time, there's this one episode, it's one of the early SpongeBob episodes where SpongeBob's best friend is Patrick, but in this very early episode, SpongeBob was really convinced that Squidward was his best friend, mm-hmm. and went to extremely increasing heights to convince Squidward that he was his best friend, including breaking into his house. And on the flip side, Patrick was also doing the same thing. And it's like when you distill that, just that concept of two obsessed people being so obsessed with someone that they start breaking into their house without their knowledge, taking their things.
Yeah.
Like they really think that they're your best, so they're obsessed with you. I mean, that's horror movie if I've ever heard it, but because just a few details were just altered very slightly, it turned into this uproariously funny comedy segment. Mm-hmm. So I do think there's like a really close marriage between that, and especially with Get Out. When I think about Get Out, which is one of the best horror movies I've ever seen, it reminds me a lot of Meet the Parents, which is very, very funny. Right. But it's the same thing where, having, I guess, personally been in this, not that I've ever been married, but being with the significant other and visiting their family, you don't know who those people are. And it's yourself just acting on best intentions, thinking that the person that you've been creating a life with has the same intentions as you, and their family is a sane, normal person, but you also don't really know that. And I feel like with Meet the Parents, that's kind of played on where like the dad's a spy. So again, if you change just a few details, that could be kind of creepy, but that's a very good comedy. Love Ben
Right.
Stiller.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
but then Get Out is so just
Yeah.
intense and scary.
Well, so that's a really good point. And the name of the TSA agent, Lil Rel Howery. Lil Rel.
Yes, he's so funny.
So it's interesting that when I went to the stand-up show, he had this habit of laughing at his own jokes, which I actually found funny. I liked that he did that. But some people thought that was a little silly, that he's laughing at his own jokes.
I like when stand-up comics laugh at their own jokes because I think it, to me at least, shows me that their jokes are fresh. Because if
Mm.
they're laughing at their own jokes, that means they still think it's funny.
That's a
Whereas,
good
like,
point.
for me personally, and granted, I'm not an expert at this, but I do stand up for fun. But
Yeah.
like when I do a new joke and I think it's funny and the audience is laughing, sometimes I'll like chuckle a little bit. But if it's stale and I've done it a few times, I kind of just say it and then it's on to the next thing. So I take that
Yeah.
as like a little cue of like, oh, they must be writing some new material and they're like still tickled by it. And it makes me happy to see that.
Got it. Got it. Oh, and getting back to Get Out, there's a little connection with me. So my sister in high school did some plays, and one of, I think, a guy in the class above her maybe one year was Bradley Whitford, who went on to West Wing and Get Out. And so it's
That's
funny to
so
see him.
cool.
I hadn't seen him in acting in a long time, and so his appearance is different. Well, he's older, but yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of fun when you see these actors take on different roles. Like speaking of Meet the Parents, right? De Niro.
Yep.
I love him in a comedy role. He's great.
Yeah, De Niro, in my opinion, I just love him so much, and he can really do a bunch of different
Yeah.
things. I think with Bradley Whitford, I love him so much, and I think prior to Get Out, the last thing I had seen him in was he played a dad on the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and
Oh, I remember that movie.
and that was a really
Sister.
pinnacle movie in my life because I
Oh
grew
my-
up right at the height of the book fame.
That's
So when the
right.
books were coming out, I was reading the books, and then the movie came out. I saw it with a bunch of friends. It was like a nice Saturday outing. He played
Sure.
a dad in that, and then 7 to 10 years later, there he was. I was like, oh my God, that's Bradley Whitford. And 10 years, and I was like, I think that's Bradley Whitford.
Right.
It sounds like Bradley Whitford.
Exactly.
But like I don't even know. It's like I think he's so good at what he does, and he can play so many different roles. And it reminds me a lot of like one of my favorite movies. It's also, I think, one of the scariest movies ever made is Silence of the Lambs.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. You're right about that. Wow.
And it's very weird because Anthony Hopkins, who obviously is Hannibal Lecter, he's truly solely made a career of only doing horror films. He's been in horror movies since he was young, so like 20 years old. But he's good at it. He's really good at it. So in my mind, keep doing it, Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. Wow.
But that movie is
Woo.
next level for me.
Do you think that people, so I was going to say there's two kinds of people in the world, people who like scary movies and people who don't like scary movies. I think though there's people who are like, they want to say that they don't like them, but they can't avoid them. That's probably me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't say that I enjoy a scary movie, but there's something about that experience that's like, maybe it's like, for me, I'm not going to do parasailing or hang gliding or jumping out of or doing a parachute jump, but maybe that's as close as I'm going to get to doing one of those things.
No, I agree. Like the adrenaline rush is very fulfilling. Yeah. I agree that I think I'm of the camp of I do like horror movies. I kind of seek them out on purpose because I think that the horror genre is one of the few genres that are it's really an adaptive genre. It's changed so much in about 30 to 40 years, because horror really was, especially in the past, when you look at it, was very much a B movie,
Mm-hmm.
like not looked at with any type of
Mm-hmm.
high regard, made very cheaply,
Cheap, right?
and very cheap scares. And then, I feel like people like Wes Craven, for example,
Mm-hmm.
really revitalized the genre. And then when you look at Scream, when Scream came out, which is such a pivotal movie, and like the horror, like a horror movie, it was scary, but it also was funny. It knew how to poke fun at itself. And then it obviously attracted Drew Barrymore, who is a great actress.
Right.
Like an A-list star wanted to be in this movie for 10 minutes, if that, of screen time.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think, the horror movie genre keeps adapting in
Right.
this way, where Get Out was so good, partly because it was so different than anything that you've ever seen. And so Jordan Peele is making these movies now that are really great, and we've just seen such a revitalization of the genre just within
Yeah.
the past 10 to 15 years alone.
Well,
So
well, you'll remember another um, groundbreaking film, Blair Witch Project, which wasn't that out in
yes,
Maryland? Wasn't
that was made it close to Frederick, not in Frederick
yeah.
exactly, but close to it. And the gentleman who filmed that, he's a Frederick native. And
Mm,
he's kind of like the Frederick celebrity. We're like, well, look, we
so funny.
have the director of the Blair Witch Project. He's a nice guy,
Huh?
actually. Um, I
That's
met
kind of
him
neat.
once in passing, but
Yeah, I like that when someone just comes up with an idea. Again, yeah, like a unique idea, and it takes off.
exactly. And, with that movie is like, again, it's made with very little money, but it's so effective. It's not what I would call like a cheap movie. Like, it's just a very effective, simple,
Mhm.
realistic plot of people getting lost in the woods, which, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I mean, I get lost even walking from point A to point B. So this is making sense to me.
Right,
But
right, right.
John, we're wrapping up. So what
Hey,
any final thoughts you have? If you have any final thoughts, the floor is yours to share them.
so I did purchase a course on like how to do lucid dreaming from Sounds True. You might know Sounds True. They do like spiritual stuff, and one of those online things where you can get like these course like audio courses. I didn't finish it, so I'm now motivated to listen to the rest of that course, and I'll let you know if I'm able to remember and participate in my dreams in the future, because that might be kind of neat to be able to do that.
And there you have it. That was the latest episode of Now Entering Dreamland, featuring the very funny John Charles. Thank you, John. If you like this podcast, if you enjoy what you're listening to, if you like these conversations about dreams and sleep, I can only recommend that you subscribe to this podcast. Now Entering Dreamland has a very handy subscribe button that will allow you to get the latest episodes right to your email. If you're not a subscribed person, you should just know we are releasing new episodes every Sunday, so you can check back next week for the latest episode. You can also visit nowenteringdreamland.com for all of the previous episodes and some other features as well. You're now leaving Dreamland, but we'll see you next time.